Welcome to Zun Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge, and joining me in this episode, for the first time in 1 year now, it's Randy Forbister. Randy, great to have you back. Can you just give a quick intro to yourself for anyone who may not be familiar with you?
Sure. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I currently work as the programming officer for the largest anime convention in Manitoba, which by the name of Icon.
As you might know if you follow this show regularly, Zun Canada, of course, is a podcast exploring the connections between anime and Canadian media, and that involves television, streaming, and also movies and cinema releases. So every year we do an episode where we kind of look back on the previous year, as far as theatrical film releases go for anime in Canada, because it's been a bit of a rocky subject for the last few years. I'd say about three or 4 years ago, we were consistently getting every film that was getting, a one or 2 day release in the United States. That has changed a lot in the last couple of years, though, and it's been a little less consistent. So what we do is we kind of look back at the films we saw. We'll talk a bit about what we thought of them, and also look at films we didn't get, kind of speculate or explore why certain films made it up here and why certain ones didn't, and paint a picture of the scene right now. But of course, the theatrical scene in Canada is mostly dominated by Cineplex, and there's been a few interesting happenings with Cineplex to start out the decade. First one is something that I was surprised to see so many people outraged about. Tanner Zipchen has been fired as the face of the Cineplex pre-show.
It's a travesty. I cannot believe they let him go.
Apparently, this is an unpopular opinion, but I hate the Cineplex pre-show and everything it stands for, and I think it should be abolished, which I suspect is not what's happening right now.
No.
But yeah, how long has he been doing it for?
It has to be, I think, if I recall, he was saying 3-4 years.
Yeah.
About that, which sounds right to me.
Okay, yeah, so it hasn't been that long, but yeah, he's been there. I think he's been there for a while. I think I don't know who was doing it before him, but I don't think they've had anyone doing it as long as he has.
No, I don't believe so either. Like they had, gosh, why do I know this? They had Mark Saltzman do all of the tech segments of the Cineplex pre-show, and he still pops up from time to time.
Yeah.
But Tanner Z, as he goes by,
Tanner Z
has been there for quite a while, and I guess he's not unpopular, which is interesting.
I'm sure some focus group has determined that correctly, given the social media outrage that emerged from this. Yeah, I have no idea why they would do that or what they have in mind for the future. I'm pretty sure it's going to be more of the same kind of thing. Regardless of what happens with that, probably the bigger news with Cineplex is that they've been bought out by Cineworld, a UK-based company. So Cineplex are, basically monopolizing cinema overlords here in Canada, are now no longer even Canadian. They are our theatrical landscape is now dominated entirely by almost entirely by a foreign company.
That's wild to me. Just like the fact that in Canada we've had the one company having domination overall has been really unfortunate. And now that it's not even Canadian, I don't get the point of it. Personally.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to change very much in terms of just market penetration and which companies hold a certain amount of power or anything like that. I think we're going to see there's going to be just as many Cineplexes, and then you get like Landmark and independent theaters just kind of on the sidelines, providing the closest thing to an alternative that's even possible. But it is basically they have the monopoly pretty much. I don't think anything's going to change much day-to-day operations. I'm sure a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, as is always the case with this kind of thing. I can't think of any good that can come out of this, honestly, or anything that can be improved. I mean, Cineplex has a lot of problems, but they're just not problems I see anyone bothering to fix.
No, there's lots that Cineplex could be doing if they actually had competition.
Yeah.
I mean, like just looking at the US, you have the AMC A-list, like the subscription services
Mm-hmm.
are popping up there because you have the different theater companies competing against each other. But there's nothing to stop Cineplex from just saying this is the way things are and this is how you're going to work. Besides like the scene points, which is the smallest breadcrumbs that they could hand out to us. Which leaves just the independent theaters trying to, or not even independent like the other theaters, trying different techniques. And to that I'll say the Landmark Cinema in my city has actually completely changed how they market themselves. They've now started marketing themselves as kind of like a luxury theater.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they have like the comfiest theater seats I've seen in any theater.
Yeah. Yeah, same.
Which is really a good thing, but it's still hard to make that decision to go to a Landmark because there's only one. It's pretty far from me. And in my head, why am I going to this theater if I can go to a Cineplex theater and get scene points to help me get a discount for the movie in the future, which is ridiculous to think about.
I have never fallen into the temptation of the scene points myself. And there is a Landmark fairly close to me, and I try to go there when I can. I mean, I think it's kind of futile to always try to support the competitor in those situations. Like the thing about making the seats comfier at Landmark or having like lounge seats is that they've dramatically reduced the number of seats that they have in each theater, which almost seems like an admission of the fact that not as many people went to Landmark to begin with, so they may as well have fewer seats that are a lot comfier. And but the problem with Landmark is that it is significantly less frequent that they get any kind of special event movies or limited release films. Sometimes they pop up. Actually, as we saw with, we'll get into it in a bit, with the second Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel film. Cineplex couldn't even contain that one. Landmark had a whole bunch of screenings going for that as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Didn't happen over here, but
in BC and I think a couple other provinces, there were Landmarks were doing a whole bunch of screenings for it, which to me says that Aniplex probably took a look at the Fate Go numbers and realized that they have to go all out up here because I think the game is very popular up here and makes them a lot of money.
Sure is.
But yeah, so that's kind of the situation with Cineplex. I'd be curious to see if the new ownership is going to have any impact on the way Cineplex events works. If you're not familiar with the like minutia of all this, most anime you see run theatrically in Canada is not done direct. Well, it's done through Cineplex, but Cineplex has a sub company that's called Cineplex Events. They are basically the Canadian equivalent to Fathom Events. It's just confusing because they don't have a completely separate brand like Fathom does. And Fathom is a consortium of multiple U.S. theaters. A program that they run, they do things like opera, limited event releases, a lot of foreign films that only run 1 or 2 days, and of course anime. And anime is a big part of what has kept Fathom, or what has helped Fathom grow in the United States over the last 4 or 5 years. And while Cineplex Events does take on many of the anime films, they don't take on as many, nearly as many as Fathom does. I think over 2019, from the looks of things, I say we got maybe about 2/3 of the anime films that were released in the U.S. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Maybe a little more. I think 2019 was better than 2018. 2018 was pretty bad. We saw a little bit of an improvement in 2019.
We did,
I'd say. I think Cineplex Events has picked up the slack a little bit, but the problem is they don't push it very hard at all. They don't push it like Fathom does. With Fathom Events, they were running trailers for like I Want to Eat Your Pancreas in front of Spider-Verse in early 2019, or because that was still in theaters at the time, or actually they were even promoting it in 2018. Whereas Cineplex Events, I mean, for the longest time they didn't even run trailers ever for anime films. Now they're at least running anime trailers in front of other anime.
Mm-hmm.
That's more than they did like a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So at least they're promoting it a little bit, but they haven't gotten to the point where they're running anime ads before non-anime films. Or other animated films, or just regular release films, or anything like that. So you're not seeing that kind of push happening with Cineplex. They seem, I wouldn't say reluctant to take it on, but they're doing the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a little less than the bare minimum, and that's probably all we can expect from them.
Yeah.
I don't expect any of that is going to change with the new ownership, especially since I don't think the UK really has releases handled in the same fashion that we see in the U.S. and Canada. I think it's all kind of done in a different way over there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that for sure. I actually haven't looked into it very hard.
No,
Um,
I can't see too much changing as far as that goes, though. Like I think a large part of why like anime has such a bigger social impact in the States, a lot of because of Toonami and
yeah,
that resurgence and how that's kind of brought it, like having the new stuff on TV right away kind of keeps the anime audience in the States a little more together
yeah,
and unified in terms of what they're watching. And in Canada, we don't really have that. We just have what you are watching on streaming, and that changes from everyone to everyone. And if there was some kind of like unified, everyone watches this thing, or like a large amount of people watch this segment on TV, that kind of brings people a little closer together. Like we still see the anime fans come together for the conventions, but that isn't quite the same as in the States, where it's really becoming more and more prevalent, I would say.
yeah. I mean, anime convention gatherings are the audiences that go to anime conventions. When you're at the point you go to an anime convention, you're kind of beyond the mainstream at that point. The
Exactly.
mainstream is going to be hitting people who wouldn't associate themselves with anime fandom at all, to the point of
Mm-hmm.
going to a convention, or even thinking of going to a convention. And that, as we've gone on about ad nauseum on this show, that's kind of the problem here. And even if there was like a collection of titles like on Crave or something like that, that would probably make a significant difference,
Mm-hmm.
or excuse me, or kind of create that kind of mainstream hotbed that is the basis for everything. And yeah, Toonami really does play that role to a large extent in the United States, far more than I think people think. Many people seem to think that cable and satellite are completely dead, which is far from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely on a decline, but wherever people thought it was about 5 or 6 years ago is probably where it is now.
I went to the U.S. in December, and while I was there, I caught a bit of just the Cartoon Network blocks, and just seeing how there were always ads for the Toonami and all the shows, like throughout the day, throughout whatever was playing on the TV, and just seeing how that was just always there was just mind-boggling to me based
Yeah.
on what we see when I watch any kind of TV, like kids-based channels or adult-based channels. You don't see any of that stuff, period.
Yeah.
And just like the difference in what you see on channels that are very easily accessible is pretty staggering, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even on Joe Para Talks with You, they make jokes about Toonami on that show. He's got to be careful, otherwise Adult Swim Canada is going to pull him off the air. But yeah, that's kind of the situation, and I guess just to give the extra background, if you weren't aware, Fathom has only been doing anime films in the States for a few years now, but it's marked a big shift in the way that it's handled, because having a company that is directly tied with the three most prominent theater chains has made it much, much, much easier for more companies to get their anime films just running in like 1 or 2 night special engagement events across the United States. It's just been far more easier, far more efficient than it's ever been before. And the thing about anime is that I think the thing that companies have finally figured out is that with films, if you can get it in theaters before the home video release happens in Japan, lots of people will go see it because there's no way for them to pirate it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually probably one of the best ways to get anime or people who watch anime to pay money to see anime is to put it in theaters. because there's at that point there's no way for them to get it yet. But Canada has been, I don't want to say Canada's been slow on the uptake, because when more of these companies were doing direct distribution with the theaters or working through, actually 11 Arts started as a company that helped get distributors like Funimation and Aniplex and those companies into theaters and get their stuff into theaters, and they would always be able to get things in U.S. and Canadian theaters. Sometimes they'd even secure more screenings in Canada. I don't even know how they did that, but it just made economic sense when they were doing that at the time. But now that the theaters have beefed up Fathom Events, which gives them more direct control over things, and it also in a way makes it easier for the companies to get their films out wider, and I guess cuts down on the middlemen. Companies have just been going straight to Fathom to get their films out, but of course Fathom doesn't deal in Canada. They have to make a separate deal with Cineplex Events to get the films out here, and we're still at a point where a lot of companies just either don't know that they have to deal with Cineplex Events, or just don't want to go through the effort of dealing with two different companies. It has improved a lot this year, because we've seen for a while, even G-Kids wasn't really bothering working with Cineplex Events to get stuff out, or at least there was some kind of issue that was keeping them from getting their films out. They seem to have made some strides to improve that, because as you may know, Ride Your Wave, the new Masaki Yuasa film, is going to be in Cineplex theaters in February 2020, which is actually, I think that marks the first time that Cineplex Events has done a Masaki Yuasa film, even though there's been like 3 of them that have been released through Fathom at this point. Cineplex Events didn't do any of them before, which is a travesty, honestly, but I'm glad it's getting addressed now. We've seen there have been issues with companies, but it seems things are kind of starting to stabilize, but there are still some outliers who kind of aren't playing ball. But we'll sort of establish that as we go through each of the films, because we're looking back at 2019 again. So I mean, I got a list here. I think it's pretty exhaustive of all the stuff that came out over the last year, and throughout 2019. And the first film I'm going to bring up, it's actually one that was released in the United States in 2018. All the Canadian screenings it got, though, were in 2019, and that's because I don't know what happened here, but 11 Arts initially announced that they'd be releasing this film in both the U.S. and Canada in late 2018, but the Canadian Cineplex release never happened, and there's never been an explanation as to why. Given that 11 Arts announced it, and then it didn't happen, I'm assuming Cineplex Events just didn't want it for some reason, and it was Liz and the Blue Bird, which is really unfortunate because, of course, 2019 was the year that the arson attack happened at Kyoto Animation, and one of the best films that Kyoto Ani has produced. Actually, I think probably the best film that they've produced, that I've seen at least. Actually, I haven't seen A Silent Voice yet, so I can't weigh in on that. Liz and the Blue Bird is probably the best film I've seen from them. Certainly, and I think it's very disappointing that this movie didn't really get a chance to get a proper release here. It did have a couple. Actually, I think the only proper theatrical screening, like in a theater that it got, was in Vancouver, at the Van City Theater, and that's because I asked them to play it, and then when they played it, I couldn't even see it because they scheduled it on a weekday and I had to work. Right. So that was pretty disappointing. I did eventually watch it. It is a beautiful film. You can get it on Blu-ray for like $20. But you saw Liz and the Blue Bird?
Yes, we actually screened it at Icon Winterfest.
Yes, it did show up at quite a few cons over the course of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get the screener copy before, so I watched it a few days before we screened it at Winterfest. I found it to be an exceptional movie. I would say, for my money, the best Kyoto Animation movie I've seen has been Tamako Love Story. From the same director, and this Liz and Bluebird has a lot of the same storytelling styles that Tamako Love Story has. Very slow and deliberate pacing, a lot of quiet moments, and a lot of really, really impressive character acting for very small, intricate details that I found really enhanced the story that was being told. Like both Liz and the Bluebird and Tomoko Love Story have these really are pretty small, intimate stories, and the fact that we're seeing this in an animation format uh, lets you really take in those character acting moments in a way that you wouldn't necessarily notice in a live action movie. And
Yeah.
I found that really interesting and
Yeah.
really impressive.
Yeah. Naoko Yamada, she is definitely the most cinematically inclined of the KyoAni directors. And in case you weren't aware, she is still alive. I don't believe she was actually even in the primary studio when the arson attack happened.
Mm-hmm.
With Listen to Bluebird, I don't know how it. I'm not familiar with Sound Euphonium. Listen to Bluebird, it's a film that very much stands on its own. You don't have to know anything about Sound Euphonium at all to go into it or appreciate it. It helps because then you'll know the characters a little more, but it is completely unnecessary. It is a standalone film, and I'm assuming that it adapts some portion of the original light novels. I don't know to some extent because it really feels like the staff of the film just found a very small little detail from the novels, a very small aspect of the relationship between two characters and like the dependency between the two characters, and just honed in hyper specifically on that one sentiment and the way that one sentiment and the one element of their relationship kind of intersects with a few other things that's going on. And again, I'm not really familiar with Sound Euphonium. I believe this is happening between the second season and the final film, which we also got later in the year. But narratively, the focus is on just these characters kind of dealing with their relationship and moving past things and the way that the ups and downs of how their friendship is built and how it affects other aspects of their lives. And the way it's able to illustrate that through like character direction and through allegory, it's absolutely stunning. I think the entire film doesn't take place in the school, but like around the school. Even events where they go to other places that are divorced from the school, like the beach or anything, it happens completely off screen, which is I thought was a really interesting, deliberate choice because it just makes it so focused and so intimate. But yeah, it's a exceptional film, and if you haven't seen it, again, the Blu-ray is like $20. Just go buy it. You can.
Yeah.
I think you can probably get it at Walmart or other mainstream retailers. It's a show factory release, so it's kind of everywhere. A very bare bones release, though. I don't think they had any special features on it.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, it's just an exceptional piece of animation. And if you haven't seen it and you really like slow moving, deep character study movies, this is something that you absolutely have to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, like at most, the other characters appear from the back of their head for a scene or two, and that's about all of the main series characters that show up.
Yeah.
So it's really just a side story between these two girls in the woodwind section, which is pretty much divorced from the rest of the series, and it's a completely standalone, easily digestible story by itself.
Yeah, and like much of Sound Euphonium, at least for what I've seen of it, it's a test of how close they can get to making this like a lesbian relationship with still having enough room to deny that that's like actually the case, which I know that's an aspect of the series that people are pretty critical of, or feel very have various feelings about. But I mean, you can read it. You can absolutely read it that way too. If you want.
It can be read either way, really.
It can,
as a close friendship or romantic.
Yeah.
Both readings provide valid interpretations of the events that happen.
That I found that quite surprising, actually. And I thought it worked well in that way. The first film that got released actually in 2019 in the U.S. I think was actually Modest Heroes. Or actually, my timing might be off. But there was a compilation film from Studio Ponoc, who did Mary and the Witch's Flower, called Modest Heroes. A G-Kids release, surprisingly, not released in Cineplex theaters at all in Canada. It did hit a couple of film festivals, I believe, but it did not get a wide release. I didn't hear a lot of people talking about this one, so did you really hear much about it, Randy?
I just knew of it when it was coming out because like short film compilations are kind of in my wheelhouse, and I'm always kind of curious about those. But the fact that Modest Heroes, its total runtime is less than an hour,
Yeah.
so I'm not entirely surprised that it didn't make it to theaters. I can't see, I wouldn't be able to see like a Cineplex thinking that would like an hour movie would be worth putting into a theater.
That might, I mean, it didn't stop Fathom, but
Yeah,
I
no,
could
but
definitely see that, yeah.
mhm.
But also, again, I think this was like the tail end of G-Kids not really prioritizing Cineplex events.
Yeah.
I think from this point on, I think pretty much everything they put out has hit Cineplex, though. So this was kind of the last kind of dud from that stretch of films
Hmm.
not getting pushed up here. But I think the January of course also saw the release of Dragon Ball Super Broly, which somehow wasn't a wide release. Actually was still a Cineplex events thing, and Fathom events in the States, but an event film that was pushed to the absolute limits of what qualifies as an event film because it was basically a wide release. I
Yeah.
think this was playing pretty much everywhere in the country well, I mean, unless you live in a very small community where there's no theater, of which there are many.
Hmm.
But yeah, there was it would be hard to not find Dragon Ball Super Broly playing in a theater. It did extremely well, and I think that may have been a bit of a game changer just in Cineplex taking on anime because once again a reminder that you can get a major hit sometimes if it's connected to the right franchise.
Yeah, and then in Dragon Ball Super Broly's case, it came off of a incredibly popular finale for that series.
Yeah,
Like the Dragon Ball Super finale, like in some countries in South America, I believe like they took out like stadiums to watch it
oh,
for the finale.
in Mexico they were just
Yeah,
playing
okay.
at giant screens on the streets, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely was one of the biggest reawakenings for Dragon Ball in general. Like people were talking about Dragon Ball who I hadn't heard talk about Dragon Ball in ages. And the Broly movie really used that momentum and continued the story that was being told. And of course, having Broly in it helped a lot because Broly himself is a very, very popular character. He's definitely the most popular movie only character from Dragon Ball. And this new interpretation of where he comes from and how his origins are really, really interesting and a
Yeah,
big improvement on what they were in the original non-canon movies as well.
yeah. I think Toriyama mentioned that like he wasn't really familiar with Broly, but he acknowledged that he was really popular for a reason. And of course Toriyama gives input on all the Dragon Ball stuff that gets released now. So whether you're following the movies or the show or the manga, it's all they're not all exactly the same, but they're all kind of quote unquote canon to some
Hmm.
extent, as long as it gets his seal of approval, which stuff was not the case with the older
No.
animated material. But I think when Toriyama was giving his input, it seemed like he focused on what made Broly popular and sort of worked backwards to find out how to turn that into a compelling character, and it worked really well in the movie. Dragon Ball Super Broly is a lot of fun. And again, I haven't watched the full ending of Dragon Ball Super yet, but the animation quality just takes this massive upturn right at
Hmm.
the end of the series for the last portion of the tournament, and that carries into Dragon Ball Super Broly because this is astonishingly a film that, for once, Toei didn't cheap out with,
Hmm.
which they usually do. I really wasn't a big fan of Resurrection of F, but Broly totally made up for it. This is the good stuff as far as Dragon Ball goes.
Yeah.
My only complaint is like again with a lot of the super stuff, the totally conspicuous lack of blood. which is I don't understand why they do that. Apparently, okay. I understand why they do it. It's because they seem to be under the impression that it will make it more marketable internationally, but that doesn't apply to movies at all. And they're kind of going. I think they're kind of going off of data from the early 2000s.
Yeah, definitely. I think they've definitely started keeping Americans in mind because, like, in the Western audiences, I should say.
Yeah.
And looking back on what was the input when Dragon Ball was super popular in the mid 90s in North America, and that included keeping the blood content down. And I think that definitely influences how they do it nowadays. Like, even like the Dragon Ball Kai re-airs had a lot of the blood taken out too.
They kept some in though, but like I don't know. I think the lack of blood in Super just seems kind of weird, especially when it's quite Broly's pretty brutal.
Oh yeah,
and I don't think having a little bit of blood would have made it seem way worse or even pushed it into PG-13 in the States or anything like that. So.
But like even without the blood, I found the fights pretty brutal. Like I think there's a scene where Frieza gets his head pushed against like an entire cliffside.
Yeah.
And like lots of those kinds of like, oh, like I know how that's gonna feel and that's gonna hurt. Like lots of brutal without necessarily showing the blood, which works in its own way, even though it's not entirely what Dragon Ball has been before.
Yeah. And it also featured the canon introduction of not only Broly, but also Gogeta. And I appreciate that they were absolutely certain to get at least a cameo appearance of Fat Gogeta in there as well. That was a very important touch, and I'm glad they did it. And yeah, I'm going to be curious to see. I think the Dragon Ball Super manga is now covering the Broly arc, which probably means that whenever the anime comes back, it's going to be a rehash of the movie, which we'll see how that goes.
From what I've heard, it's a little past there. I mean, we may be hearing something different. I hear it's past the Broly arc, and that Goku and Vegeta are now working with the Space Force, from what I've heard. Okay. I've heard that's currently what's happening. I don't keep up with the manga because it just isn't
obviously neither do I.
Yeah, it's not up my alley. But I've heard some interesting things that are happening, and I'm sure whenever Dragon Ball Super comes back, which I guess now will be after that Digimon series that just got announced, which is taking the Kitaro slot. I think after that, Dragon Ball might come back, and if it comes back and it keeps up that momentum, it's gonna keep like steamrolling ahead for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So also, February 2019 saw a couple more releases that notably we did not get. The biggest one I mentioned already was I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, which was the semi-tragic romantic comedy, or not comedy, just romance film, with the alarming title that I think Fathom and the distributors tried their best to grab people's attention with, which I have not seen because I don't even know how you can see it now. Did Aniplex release this?
I haven't heard about it. Like they must have released it somehow.
Yeah. I think it might be out on like an extremely expensive Blu-ray that I'm absolutely not paying for. That was really disappointing. That was like one of the biggest examples of a company just making a deal with Fathom Events and leaving it at that. I'm kind of surprised that it happens because they marketed the shit out of this in the States, and you really couldn't ignore that marketing from other countries.
No. But
the United States was the only country that got that movie in theaters. It was blasted so much. The message was blasted out so much, and they just would not consider expanding beyond that. And I don't understand why. That was very frustrating.
Yeah. I'm looking online right now on Right Stuff. It's a Right Stuff exclusive, and it came out in October on Blu-ray.
Oh, okay.
But
so not only so Right Stuff exclusive too.
Yeah. Right Stuff exclusive, $50 MSRP US dollars. Which, but that kind of surprised me about Aniplex. This is the second that I can think of off the top of my head that is an Aniplex movie that has been released for a while, but is only on disc and has not been on streaming. Usually the rest of their movies have been streaming somewhere, usually Netflix. But right now I can think of Dokyusei and now I Want to Eat Your Pancreas have both been released on Blu-ray and have not shown up anywhere else yet.
Yeah, and Dokyusei, that was, well, I mean, it's a short movie, but that's another one that we did not get in theaters up here. I don't think it even screened at any conventions up here. And yeah, the tactic in that case is just show it in theaters in the U.S. and then hope that the people who saw it in theaters will buy the home video release, which a very flawed strategy.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I'm you know what? It's flawed strategy from my perspective. I'm sure it works perfectly fine for Aniplex because they make all the money they need from it.
Exactly.
But yeah, it goes against the better Aniplex strategy, which is put the content on every streaming platform you possibly can, and then make a really nice Blu-ray set that the people who really like the film or TV series will pay for. That is how you do it. But movies are just a big problem with streaming, and not just with Aniplex, with even G-Kids and 11 Arts. I think that G-Kids has some content that's streaming on Verve, which of course is, despite the never-ending promises by certain Crunchyroll staff that Verve is coming to countries outside of the United States, that has still not happened, and I don't think it's going to happen for a while, if ever, given what a mess Warner's whole streaming situation is right now.
Yeah, I can't see Verve ever making its way out here at this point. Yeah. It's taken so long at this point, and they've basically stopped even commenting on Canada. So I wouldn't be surprised if we never see it, which is not the biggest deal to me, since the only programs from Verve that I would have been interested in were High Dive and Crunchyroll, and combined, it's not even a huge amount of money to get those two. Back when they had Shudder, I would have been more interested, but I know that Shudder even went off Verve in the States, and
they did.
I believe it's part of Amazon now, as it is in Canada.
Yeah, of course you can also get Shudder on its own.
But, yeah, of course you get Shudder on its own.
Yeah. But still, Verve there's a little catalog of titles that is only on Verve. That includes it has Last Man, which is a French animated series that you can't see here any other way. In fact, you can't even watch the trailer on Verve's YouTube channel in Canada. And they have some G-Kids movies. Not all of them. There's still, I think, the majority of G-Kids films are just not really streaming anywhere right now. I think, given that they were able to work out a deal with HBO Max for the Studio Ghibli films, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more G-Kids content on that platform in the U.S. But of course, that is yet another Warner-based platform that we're not getting up here. Because Crave is getting the HBO Max original content, but none of the ancillary stuff, which is what I would want HBO Max for.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah, so that stuff's just going to remain kind of in limbo indefinitely, unless someone does anything about it. Oh, actually, Crave is streaming Dragon Ball Super Broly. You can see it on there on the full Crave HBO movies package. It's still there, and it is labeled as anime. They made an anime descriptor for it, so that suggests that they recognize anime as a category that could exist potentially. But when you search anime, that's the only thing that comes up right now. So maybe they'll look into getting some movies. I'd love to see them get the Studio Ghibli films on there, because that seems to be the most likely scenario, the most plausible scenario at least. But yeah, I'm not holding my breath on that. And then also in February we saw the release in the States of Gundam Narrative, which that movie got a reaction. Did you see that one?
I have not. I haven't seen. I've been in a bit of a Gundam drought for the past 2 years. Yeah. Ever since, I think, Build Fighters Dive kind of killed every interest I had in Gundam for a while. Just wasn't great. I still collect model kits that I need to build, but beyond that, I haven't watched a lot of Gundam, which is too bad.
So this film is apparently wretched. As soon as it screened in the States, my Twitter was just lit up with with people who had very colorful things to say about it. Apparently, it's a giant disaster. Some have said that we dodged a bullet by not having to watch this movie in theaters. And I probably would have gone to see it if we had gotten it. So maybe I should count my blessings. It actually had two separate releases, one for the subtitled version and one for the dubbed version in the U.S. But we got neither. And that's because these releases were being done directly by Sunrise, and I don't think that Sunrise even thought to work with anyone but Fathom. Because again, like, Fathom has just become the go-to company for getting your movie out to English-speaking audiences. I think Japanese companies have come to even see it that way. Whereas the idea that you also have to deal with Cineplex events to get your movie out in Canada, I think it is a nuance that is not as widely recognized, unfortunately. So even though we didn't have to watch a terrible movie in theaters, it's still unfortunate that it was overlooked. The Cineplex events was overlooked for probably that reason. Mm-hmm. And we also at the end of the year there was also Char's Counterattack, which got a subtitled release, basically through the same strategy that we didn't see up here. And then next year, in late 2020, we're seeing that new Hathaway Flash movie, which is kind of a sequel to Char's Counterattack, which I gotta say I am not optimistic about.
No, I think I would have loved to see Char's Counterattack in theater. That's the one. Like I mean, that movie is, lots of that movie is real bad.
Oh yeah,
but
it is a massively Tomino film.
Yeah, but just to see, like, I'm trying to think of the exact date, like late 80s, early 90s mecha animation.
Yeah.
On a big screen would have been absolutely phenomenal to see.
Yeah, definitely.
But and not seeing that is pretty unfortunate. But narratively, it's okay that we didn't get it.
Yeah. Which also with Char's Counterattack, they only screened it with the Japanese with English subtitled version, and not the Canadian dub, which I don't know what influenced that decision. I know all the characters have been recast for when they appear in Gundam: The Origin and any later installments that involve the original Universal Century crew, but. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that had anything to do with that decision. I don't know. We'll see. But it was too bad they didn't put the dub out, because the movie does have a decent dub, even though the movie itself is a little questionable. Mm-hmm. And also February saw the release of one of the most important Hollywood releases of the year, Alita: Battle Angel, which I talked about. That was one of my top 3 picks for just one of my favorite things from 2019 in the holiday special. Last month. But yeah, Alita: Battle Angel, a movie 20 years in the making, and it's a special film.
Yeah, I had a blast watching that movie. I kind of can't believe that it was made and it was that faithful to the original series. Like, I know I've never seen the OVA, but I know a lot of it from AMVs. As he was growing up, Alita has a lot of really impressive imagery, and I've seen a lot of those in AMVs, specifically the moment on the cable up to the Sky City, and the events that happened there, and I was stunned that it actually managed to get that far into that movie and had that part, and was so, like, it actually killed off the boyfriend, which I found kind of, and like, I absolutely did not expect that to happen whatsoever. I thought it was gonna be like,
it was glorious. It was absolutely glorious.
And the fact that they actually, as soon as he started climbing up, I was like, oh no, they're going to do it. And I loved it. I loved every second of that movie.
Yeah,
it was fantastic.
It brazenly went against Hollywood convention in many ways, and that's because it pinpointed what was great about 90s cyberpunk OVAs, mm-hmm. and they honed in on it. They rather than trying to turn it into a movie, they translated it into live action and put it in theaters. I think that's maybe a better way of describing it, because it is in many ways not a conventional movie. It is in some ways it is. There are a few compromises, but I think those compromises are actually pretty small. They translated the feeling of the 90s OVA over very well, and that obviously resulted in a mixed reaction from the normies for sure. But I thought it was great. I'm happy with it. I wish there was more coming, but there probably won't be.
Probably not. But what we got was glorious.
Yes, I will celebrate it. So shortly after that, I think, was it March when we finally got the second Heaven's Feel film?
I believe so. That's what I don't have a complete list of dates with the movies, but I have an order of where I believe they landed.
Yeah, it was March, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one, there was quite a bit of buzz, and I contributed to this a fair bit on social media because it was initially announced that it was being released through Fathom Events. And at this point in time, when something is announced as being released through Fathom Events, that means that Canada probably isn't getting it, because at this point you needed some kind of middleman or other company involved that had a history of dealing with Canada to get the film out in Canada. And if no company like that was announced, I think it was pretty reasonable to assume that a Canadian release was not going to happen. And in the case of Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel 2, A Lost Butterfly, the complete title of that film, that would have been very disappointing, because the first one that came out in 2018 did extremely well. I think the majority of the screenings were sold out. So the prospect of that film only coming out, or not getting a Canadian release because Aniplex only wanted to work with Fathom, was really, really disappointing. But of course, people made a lot of noise about it because it's Fate. And I think a Canadian release probably had been in the cards the whole time, because they did announce one a couple weeks later. And it was actually more extensive than the U.S. release, whereas the U.S. release was only over 2 days. The Canadian release was over 6. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, it wasn't just in Cineplex. Landmark Cinemas was also playing the movie at many of their locations. I know that they were at the New Westminster location in BC. I think the other BC ones were playing it as well, and in a few other provinces. So there was definitely recognition of the success of that first film here, and I think the second one did really well. I know that for the first film they did a subtitled release and then a separate dubbed release, and we didn't get the separate dubbed release for that first one. They didn't do that with this one, though, did they? Do you recall?
No, I don't think they did at all.
Yeah, it was just this one release. Yeah. But we got it, and man, what a movie! Fate is something I've really only recently gotten into. I think I'm one of those people who really kind of only cares about Fate Zero, but I did watch Unlimited Blade Works afterwards. And I got to say, I'm quite enjoying these Heaven's Feel films. I know people there seems to be a sentiment that it's the worst of the 3 routes from the game, but I think they work really well as movies. I think they've honed in on kind of the strengths of that arc and cut out the repetitive stuff. I think it feels, even though I haven't played the game, it feels to me like a successful adaptation.
Yeah, I think lots of and I think opinion has turned around on Heaven's Feel a lot with the release of these movies. I think a lot of the earlier noise about Heaven's Feel was just because it centered around Sakura, and she was not really, like, of the 3 heroines in Fate, she's the least popular. But Heaven's Feel is the route that has the most mature topics, definitely ties the most in with ideas from Fate Zero, and really just reveals everything that there is to know about what the story is. And it's definitely the most mature of the 3. Like, I like Unlimited Blade Works a lot, but it's basically just a typical hero narrative with a few extra swerves thrown in. And Heaven's Feel takes the action parts and really almost throws them to the side and embraces the horrific nature of what the Grail War actually entails.
Yeah.
And the movies really lean into just the horrors of what happens. And I found that really, 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 really interesting.
Yeah. It's like the diseased the diseased core of everything has been exposed, and it is very ugly and unsettling, and that seems to be the aesthetic approach, and I think it is very successful.
Yeah.
In those movies, they've done a good job of that. And again, I think just the cinematic format helps because, I'm assuming in the light novel you kind of have to retread through certain plot points again when you do each of these routes. That's what I'm led to believe. I haven't played the game, so
pretty much I would say at this point, like Heaven's Feel especially branches off from what the main narrative will be really, really quickly.
Yeah.
But it's probably still the first same hour 3 of the visual novel before it gets into what it's actually about. And I think lots of people really didn't like that at first. And now that they're maturing as people, I think they've found that that's actually the most interesting part.
You say that the audience is mature, but but then, as was a phenomenon that happened across the continent when this film screened, was people absolutely not able to process the idea of watching a sex scene in a movie.
Yeah.
Which I find is very disappointing. It's like, have these people seriously never seen a sex scene in a movie before?
No. So God. I actually heard that before, so I went in knowing there was going to be something.
Yeah.
I was actually, it kind of caught me off guard just how erotic the faces got.
Yeah.
I think that's the part that kind of just got even like just like a chortle of disbelief that they were actually going that far. Like I was expecting like just a regular old sex scene, and what I got was something that was a little more right from the visual novel, which I kind of found a little jarring. So I'm not entirely surprised, but I'm also really grateful that like we don't have big, loud, crazy audiences here in Manitoba, and probably in Canada generally compared to the
even in
States.
Vancouver. I have found at least it's pretty rare to have a really rowdy or highly reactive audience a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about the scene. I had heard people talking about the reaction on social media, and I don't know. I think it kind of says something about the anime fan audience to a degree that, for all the talk about how horny and sexual anime is a lot of the time, when you have an actual depiction of sex in a film, suddenly, it gets weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, that's something to chew on for sure. So yeah, that I'm looking forward to the third film. I'm guessing that it hasn't released in Japan yet, so no. I'm guessing we might see it by the end of the year. Probably 2021.
That's what I'm thinking. Probably November, December we'll get it.
Yeah.
I think there was about a 6-month wait period between the two movies, between the two releases rather, from Japan to North America. I think it was about 6 months. Like the Blu-ray hadn't released for part 2 by the time it showed in theaters here.
Yeah. So did you see Oko's Inn?
I did not see Oko's Inn.
Yeah.
I wish I had. It just, it looked, at the time, it just was not what I was in the mood for. It was a bit more on the childish side from my impressions, so I never ended up getting to it. Yeah,
it does, I haven't seen it, but I know it doesn't look like much on the surface, but I've heard very good things. I hope to rectify that. I kind of forgot about it when it was released in theaters here. It just kind of slipped by me.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, I did miss out on that. Oko's Inn was put out by G Kids, and that did get a Cineplex release. So I think that was the start of them kind of getting more back on track with Cineplex, and also, unlike last year, we got Ghibli Fest again in Cineplex theaters as well. I thought it was really weird that we didn't get that at all last year, but we had gotten it the previous year.
Oh, okay.
That almost sounds like that almost suggests to me that there was some kind of issue between the two companies that kept this. I can only speculate, but that was weird. I was glad to see that back. I did not see a single Ghibli film in theaters though. I really wanted to try and catch Princess Mononoke, but unfortunately I couldn't get the day off work.
Yeah. So. Well, if we're talking about Ghibli Fest, the only one of Ghibli Fest that I caught was Whisper of the Heart. And of Ghibli Fest, the movies that we didn't get the movies that were new that we did not have 2 years ago were Whisper of the Heart, Princess Mononoke, Kaguya, and I believe Arrietty. I could be wrong on that. Arrietty could just be the one that I didn't see 2 years ago. But of those four, I saw Whisper of the Heart for the bajillionth time in my case.
Yeah.
It's my favorite Ghibli. I'm really glad I got to see that in the theater. There's like lots of the sprawling scenes of urban Tokyo in the areas that were depicted. I found that really, really vivid and really interesting to see, especially on a bigger screen. And I liked being able to see a smaller story in theaters. It was really cool.
Yeah, I saw Whisper of the Heart a few years ago. It was playing at. Well, I know you have the Cinematheque in Winnipeg, but we have our own theater called the Cinematheque in Vancouver, and they actually played a 35 millimeter print that was a little banged up.
Yeah,
when they showed it, but it was great, good experience. Did you see Penguin Highway?
I did see Penguin Highway. I was going to bring that up if you weren't going to go back to it. Penguin Highway, I was really impressed with. I wasn't expecting much. All I knew was that it was a movie and there was something supernatural and penguins were in it.
Yeah.
And I was impressed at the themes and the tones of the story. I was surprised it was more mature than I was expecting because I knew that it was like the main character was a kid and there were penguins all around. But just getting into the themes of loss and maturity and growing up were themes that I weren't expecting from that movie. And the visuals were gorgeous, and I really liked how that whole story was put together. I found that really interesting altogether.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to expect before I saw the movie. But what I did know is that it was based off of a book by Tomohiko Morimi, who is the author of Night a Short Walk On Girl and Tatami Galaxy and that stuff. So that gave me a hint that something kind of surreal and inexplicable was going to happen in this film, and I was correct. that certainly did happen. I greatly enjoyed the film. I'm still at a bit of a loss of what it was trying to say to a degree, which was definitely something. I'd be interested in going back to it. I saw the subtitled version. Maybe I could watch the dub and see how it comes together in that. But yeah, that was it was a interesting film. Definitely a standout that's going to surpass your expectations going in. I think that was a lot of the appeal, really. Yeah, is that it's deceptively simple on the surface.
Yeah, and I found out the author after I had seen it, and I was like, oh no, that makes a lot more sense now. I ended up picking the book up. I haven't read through it yet, but I'm pretty anxious to find out more and actually dive into it a bit more.
So also in Vancouver, in basically beginning of summer, I worked with Van City Theater, and we put together a one-day anime film festival called basically Van City Anime Day. That happened in June, right before Canada Day, and Penguins Highway was one of the films that we screened for that. It was also a huge hit. It sold out, which surprised me because it had already screened in Cineplex, but I guess there was a lot of demand for it, and people love penguins, so never underestimate that.
Oh, no.
We were hoping to get more movies. Like, God, we tried so hard to get I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, but no luck. We couldn't get anywhere with picking that up. But we did get another movie that also did not get a proper release in Canada, and that was the first Made in Abyss film. The first two were released in the U.S. through Fathom. We only got the first one. I think Van City Theater was going to look into the second one, but that never materialized. But yeah, that was distributed by Sentai Filmworks, and they have been really bad with getting their stuff in theaters. I think that they were working with Ozoland before, but Ozoland kind of doesn't seem to exist anymore, or at least, are they still doing lives?
No.
No.
We'll talk about that a bit later.
Okay, all right, yeah. But Ozoland it's basically gone, or at least they're not. If it's still around, they're not doing theatrical releases like they were doing before, from what I've gathered.
Not nearly as much.
Yeah. But anyway, Sentai was working with Ozoland to get their stuff out before. They were going to release the Chunibyo movie late last year, and then they actually went back in late 2018, they announced a Canadian release, but then actually went back on it and didn't release the movie. After that, Sentai has just been working directly with Fathom, but they obviously have not bothered reaching out to Cineplex events to get their movies out as well, which is unfortunate because they really push the Made in Abyss release, which is surprising because I have to wonder how many children are going to see either of these films. Mm-hmm. The first one is not so bad. The second one is extremely traumatizing.
Yeah.
And of course, the third one is going to be coming out in 2020, and I'm expecting basically the same situation unless Sentai decides to push for a Canadian release.
I hope they do. I hope they realize the importance of releasing it up here. Like the last thing that Sentai had out here that I recall is the Girls and Panzer movie. I mean, yep. I could be wrong. There could be something in there.
I believe that is the last Sentai thing that we have gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I would, and Made in Abyss is so popular, mm-hmm. I just can't see it not coming here. Or if it's a continuation, I just hope that people would make a lot of noise at them, that they would realize that it would be profitable to be here.
I could see that happening. I could see a push for that. I mean, these other two films, they're just compilation films.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't think they even had any new footage. I think it's literally each one is like 6 to 7 episodes crammed into a movie,
mm-hmm.
Which is fine. I mean, I think it works fine like that. But also, you have another situation. I think it was just announced yesterday that Made in Abyss is getting a third anime season.
Yeah.
Which means we're going to be in that incredibly frustrating situation where you have one season of the show, and then a movie, and then another season. So you have a movie sandwiched between the two seasons.
Yeah, and the movie is from the manga too, which is a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Like, it's actually stuff that you need to see moving forward.
Yeah. So unless the new TV series is going to turn the movie into episodes, or do a reverse compilation, mm-hmm.
Which
is possible. That's happened before.
Yeah.
But unless that happens, we're going to be in a situation where we're going to get season 2 streaming, where a whole bunch of people have not seen the crucial film in between the two, because I have a feeling that film is not going to be available streaming, as is the case with most movies.
Yeah. Well, Sentai's been pretty good about putting their movies on High Dive.
They have been. Actually, High Dive is actually really good for movies.
Yeah.
Actually, of all the streaming services.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they have some of the best anime movies ever on that streaming service, which is they seem to be good at that. Funimation is not good for movies.
Nope.
Crunchyroll even worse.
Yep.
But High Dive is a good resource for movies. Just to finish off the Anime Day, we also at that event screened The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, the English dub, which was usually they don't do English dubs at Van City Theater, but they made an exception because this movie was dubbed in Vancouver. We were hoping to get a voice actor to come and do a Q&A. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out, but it still did really well, and I think that is actually the first time that movie has actually screened in Vancouver, despite the fact that it was dubbed there. Because way back in the day when Bandai Entertainment released it, they only released it in the U.S. But those were in the days before the 2 day limited engagement kind of approach, where it was actually a limited release where they had to expect theaters to play it over and over again, which usually didn't work out for non-Ghibli films back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Anime Day had what I believe is still the only Canadian screening for the new remastered version of Millennium Actress, which was really unfortunate. This is another time when 11 Arts has let us down. It seems that for some reason these Satoshi Kon re-releases are not getting picked up by Cineplex.
Yeah, well, so far the only re-release that we've had are the Sailor Moon movies.
Yeah.
Which is too bad because there's been a lot of.
Well,
really,
there was the Broly, the Dragon Ball
the
Broly films. Yeah.
But yeah, it's too bad that we can't get the G Kids re-releases over here. Like,
Yeah.
I wonder. I have to wonder if that's from G Kids' side or from Cineplex's side.
It's weird because it's so I find the issue with not getting all these anime films in Canada. It's not the fact that the US is getting stuff and we're not getting it. It's just that there doesn't seem to be any obvious rhyme or reason behind why we get some things and not other things.
Yeah.
There's just no justifiable reason that every film that gets released in the US doesn't also get a release in Canada. That's what it kind of boils down to for me. And I know when I say across Canada, I know that not every part of Canada is able to get to these films a lot of the time because you do have to be near a major city or willing to drive to a major city to see it a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Smaller communities just don't actually get anything. But just getting anything on this side of the border is better than nothing. At least it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what is up with the Satoshi Kon movies, and it seems Cineplex events. I guess now that I think about it, they do seem a little reluctant to embrace any kind of reissue of something old.
Yeah.
Unless it's attached to a major franchise. So that might be it.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that they'll reconsider with Tokyo Godfathers coming out this year. But if they passed on Perfect Blue, which did really well in the U.S. And passed on Millennium Actress, I don't see a lot of reason why they'd go for Tokyo Godfathers coming out.
Yeah, I don't know. And even going just to Cineplex in general, ever since they stopped doing their flashback film fest in the 2-week period and just spacing it out a lot more, I think that's a part of the issue too. Is like when they did the flashback film fest and had everything over 2 weeks, I went to the theater almost every day to see stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And spreading it out, I think, is possibly more profitable for them, but I just liked having everything in one place.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that, I guess. But yeah, screening Millennium Actress at the Van City Anime Day was really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of fun that I was able to host that. It was actually almost the North American premiere for that re-release because they actually just let us screen it before the Fathom release date. They didn't seem to have any issue with that. But I can't remember which convention, but a different convention beat us to the punch by 1 day. And I found out about that 2 days before. I was all ready to introduce this as the North American premiere of the remastered version of Millennium Actress, and someone beat us to the punch. Almost had it, but it didn't work out. But yeah, the Anime Day was a big success. We're probably going to be doing another event like that this year. So keep an eye on it on Fan City Theater's social media and my social media, because once things start escalating or once things start to fall into place, I'll start announcing things. Hopefully, we'll have a little more time to promote than we did for that one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm hoping to do more stuff like that in the future. Crunchyroll also put out the Saga of Tanya the Evil movie. I don't suppose you've seen any of Saga of Tanya the Evil?
I haven't seen a single bit.
Yeah.
Just the most I've seen of Tanya was when I was in Japan in 2016. We kept seeing the covers and kept thinking that they were really cool, and then the anime aired, and we lost all interest, basically.
Yeah, I don't quite know how I feel about this whole not actual Nazi imagery as allegory thing, but just quasi, we want this to be Nazis, but we can't do Nazis, so we're going to do the closest thing to Nazis so we can.
Yeah, it's it's actually,
kind of
World War
World War One. Yeah, yeah,
II. Yeah, but still, like
yeah.
it
I
becomes uncomfortable.
it kind of is, but a lot of people seem to like it, and the people I wouldn't have expected to appreciate and embrace it have. So, I mean, there must be something to it. There must be more to it. But it's not something I've gotten into.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, unfortunate that one Crunchyroll only work with Fathom for that. But it looks like Crunchyroll might be turning things around with their releases. They were getting pretty bad for a while because if I recall, I think it was in 2018 we didn't wind up getting that Cardcaptor Sakura film re-release.
Yeah.
Or was that the year before? It was
Yeah.
it was a couple years ago. Crunchyroll did get the Konosuba film out at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
That one did get a Canadian release, and most of those screenings sold out. I didn't see it myself. I don't follow Konosuba, but I heard a lot of people complaining that they couldn't even get a ticket because it was just everything was packed and sold out. And that seemed to be the case in many places across the country too.
Yeah, that's not entirely surprising to me. Like that movie, I didn't see it either, but it did get a lot of buzz behind it. And I think like just having that extra kick of the screenwriter of Pulp
Yeah.
Fiction wrote a 5-star review of it.
Yeah, Roger Avery said he commented that this was the reason that cinema exists or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that kicked a few people who were kind of on the fence to go see it.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it released for like another few engagements after that.
What unexpected publicity.
Yeah.
Like Crunchyroll could never have seen that one coming.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah. But it did well. I hope that bodes well for Crunchyroll getting more movies out up here. Because there's probably going to be more of that in the future.
I would think so.
So, yeah. So what else? Did you see Code Geass: The Resurrection?
I did not see Code Geass: The Resurrection. Yeah. I was in Japan at that time.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
I went on my second trip there.
Yeah. That was I heard mixed things. I never watched season 2 of that series.
Nor did I.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I've made peace with many of my misgivings about Code Geass.
Yeah.
So maybe I should go back and give it another try.
I think the same thing. I was watching season 2 until I heard that they killed off my favorite character, and then I stopped watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't see Code Geass. Did we talk about, is Euphonium next on your list, or?
Yeah. Let's talk about Euphonium. So, the Sound Euphonium release is very interesting because it happened right, like, literally a day or two after the arson attack at the Kyoto Animation Studio. And also this was it highlighted something a little frustrating that's been happening with films in Vancouver, where they would there'd be screenings scheduled in some of the suburbs of Vancouver, like around Langley and North Vancouver, which is not the north of the city of Vancouver. It is it's across the inlet, so not convenient to get to. And then like maybe 1 week before the actual screening would happen, they would announce that there'd be a screening at the International Village Cinema in Vancouver proper, which is not the big downtown Cineplex in Vancouver. It is a small tucked away kind of cross between an art house theater and a Cineplex at the top of a dingy old mall. So unlike in Toronto, which is different from like other major cities like in Toronto and Montreal, where the anime and big Cineplex event stuff play in the big downtown theaters. And I don't know, is that the case in Winnipeg, where the Cineplex event stuff is mostly in the bigger theater downtown?
Kind of.
Yeah.
So how it used to be in one of our two biggest theaters. We have two big malls in Winnipeg, and both of those are connected to a theater. A while back, they converted one of the discount theaters to a VIP theater instead. And now that theater, which is in a newer area of the city where they're just starting to develop a lot more, that's the one that now gets all of the anime releases. and except unless it's a really, really big release, in which case it will go to one of the two bigger theaters. The unfortunate thing is that area is incredibly hard to bus to. So it makes it really tough for lots of teens to get to them. It's basically in the exact opposite of the end of the city for me. So to get there, it has to be an ordeal. It's a nice theater. It's just, I wish it could have gone to one of the bigger ones instead of the smaller one. And I know that I've had some people investigate for me why that is. And 11 Arts, the contact that we had with them, said that is what Cineplex said is the biggest theater in the city, which is just completely untrue.
Yes.
So I found that really interesting. I think they want to push that theater a lot more, and and I think that's part of the reason they put the events there.
That's because it's interesting because in the city of Vancouver, like the anime usually shows up in either International Village or the Park on Cambie. Those are both small theaters. They are small old theaters. They are not big Cineplex. Like we have the big Scotiabank theater downtown. That one never has anime. So I guess that means that Cineplex is like must be like pointing all these distributors to release their films at the smaller theaters for some reason. And I don't understand why that is. There seems to be a weird politics.
Yeah, there's some
decisions.
reason that they are doing that. And it just, it has to be some kind of internal change, because that's also where all the flashbacks usually go now as well. Meanwhile, and like the flashbacks used to be at one of the two major theaters. So something internally definitely changed in how they organize that.
But going back to Sound Euphonium, the movie, so they announced the Vancouver screening less than a week before it happened, and it completely sold out. It was a smaller screen they had it in, but I did go. So despite the fact that I have not watched Sound Euphonium, I still went to see it because, as with many people, I think that the tragedy at KyoAni was at the top of my mind.
Yeah.
So I did go to see the subtitled screening, and I got there just a little late, and it was completely packed. I had to sit right at the front.
Wow.
Which was not a great way to watch that movie. Unlike Liz and the Bluebird, this film, there's not much I can say about it because I couldn't really follow much of what was going on beyond what was on the surface. It seemed very much like a third season of the show. It seemed like a compilation of a third season of the show without an actual third season to be based on.
Right.
That's kind of how it felt to me.
Yeah, and for me, I was fully intending on going, and I had not seen Sound Euphonium, so I was planning to watch in the week leading up, and then the arson attack happened, and my entire will to do any of that was just gone. Like it was really, like, not to get too into it, but it was such a blow, and it was so like absolutely demoralizing to see and to hear exactly what was happening there, that I just couldn't find the will to celebrate their works when I was thinking about the tragedy that happened. And so that was kind of the reason I couldn't end up going to see it. I still intend to watch Sound Euphonium. It still looks, like everything I've seen from that show looks incredible, like the animation especially, and I intend to watch it at one point. But it's just really hard. Like, I still have trouble watching KyoAni Works right now, just thinking about that whole situation. It's pretty tough, and like it's taking a while to heal. Like, surprisingly, I didn't expect it would have that much of an impact, but like for me personally, lots of KyoAni Works had a big impact on me, and just knowing what happened makes it really hard to connect with the material again.
Yeah. And there's another that first Violet Evergarden movie is coming up for release soon too. Although right now it's been announced as U.S. only, and I think there's a very good chance that we're probably not going to see the Violet Evergarden film in Canada, at least not in theaters. And from what I have gathered, And this might not be 100% correct, but it's probably because of Netflix. Because Netflix they basically own Violet Evergarden outside of Japan, and it seems that Funimation has what's probably happened is Funimation has worked out a deal with Netflix to get Violet Evergarden in U.S. theaters, but only in the U.S. And probably if anyone else wanted to screen Violet Evergarden outside of that arrangement with Funimation, they would have to deal with Netflix and not Funimation. And we're actually something very similar has been happening with a lot of A24 film releases, specifically Uncut Gems. Uncut Gems, which is the new movie with Adam Sandler, that right now it has been out in the States for a few weeks, like a limited wide release directly through A24 Pictures. The thing is that the deal that A24 has on a lot of their movies with Netflix is that Netflix owns the movie outside of the U.S., which creates a weird situation where the film has a distributor in the U.S. but not outside the U.S. So there are some screenings that are popping up for Uncut Gems now. I think there's one in Winnipeg, and I think a one just opened in Vancouver in BC, from what I understand. But any theater that wants to show Uncut Gems, they basically have to go directly to Netflix and ask for permission to show it, which greatly reduces the number of theaters who are able to do that, because I don't think it's easy to work with Netflix for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Like, just because you said that, I looked up Uncut Gems right now to see when it was playing, because I've been dying to see it. It looks like it's playing mainly in our Cinematheque, which is also I ended up seeing The Irishman there a while back too. Yeah. And I think that's just in the smallest independentist theaters out there.
It's it's all independent theaters anything that Netflix owns. That if the only theaters that are gonna get it are independent theaters who have established some kind of pre-existing relationship with them. Like Uncut Gems, it's Van City Theaters showing it here. The Rio's going to show it later. Like, just these independent theaters are the only ones who are going to carve our relationship with Netflix most of the time. They don't seem to deal with Cineplex or Landmark or any chain or major company. And that goes for the States as well. But in the States, again, a different company is dealing with it. So I am expecting a similar situation with Violet Evergarden.
Yeah. I actually, just on that note, when I was at Cinematheque, I noticed that they actually were playing Mirai as one of their extra cabin fever is what they call it. It's like a series of films for kids on the weekends. And
it's an interesting name.
Yeah.
For that series.
So it ended up playing in Winnipeg a week or two back. I ended up not seeing it because I didn't want to take a free spot away from a child. But it did play out here, which I found neat. I still don't know if it even got a disc release here yet.
Mirai?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. It probably did. I just didn't notice.
Actually, that's a good point. I assumed that it had, but let me look it up on. Yeah, it's out.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I see a release, Blu-ray release here. Is it? I can't tell if this is just an import of the G Kid. Okay, actually, never mind.
Yeah.
You can import the G Kids release, but it looks like there is no. I didn't know that. Holy shit! I didn't realize that we didn't get a home video release for Mirai.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing because I've still been waiting to see it.
Yeah, and it's not on streaming here anywhere, is it?
Kind of. I'm a teacher, and our school division has a license with a service called Criterion On Demand.
Yes, I'm familiar with that service.
And it is dubbed only on that service. I was looking through their animated films to look for something that I could relate to my curriculum, and I noticed that movie, and I kind of just stopped and was stunned for a bit that it was actually somewhere.
Yeah, you can rent or buy it on on iTunes or Apple Store.
Hmm.
Not on Google Play, only Apple.
Of course.
Wow. Thank you, Mark II Mile High. You blew this one.
We tried getting it for Icon as well.
Yeah.
And we had a furious back and forth, and it was just a lot of confusion. I don't really want to get into too much more than that because of privacy reasons, but it was ridiculous to even try to get Mark II to figure out that they had it.
God, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a furious back and forth, and it was ridiculous, and I'm not even sure how that end. Like, we just gave up because it was too hard.
Wow. That's disappointing.
Yeah, really is.
Yeah. Yeah, these these Hosoda films. I don't know if there's been any word on Hosoda's next film, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with that because it's a rare situation where the rights are divided between Canada and the U.S. completely.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's gonna be something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's unfortunate that happened at least. Another Sentai release that came up that I didn't mention before was that came out in the U.S. but not here is the Danmachi film. Is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon? Arrow the Orion. It played at Anime Revolution in Vancouver. I'm assuming it probably showed up at some other conventions as well. But again, no proper release from Sentai for that film up here as well. And I think it was the same situation with the Utapri movie, Uta no Prince Sama.
Mm-hmm.
They played that at Anarevo, and I think it showed up at a few other conventions. But I'm not sure if that had an actual theatrical release in the States.
That's tricky. I remember hearing a lot of people talked about it, but it could have. I think it must have had a theater somewhere because I think it must have.
Yeah.
But
actually, the Rio played it in Vancouver, so I think a few independents may have picked it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Utapri is an interesting beast. I believe that movie is just a concert as well. I think it's one of those kinds of movies.
So it's animated, but it's just a concert?
I think it's animated, but it's just a concert. I believe that's what it is. There's actually there's a few franchises that do that now. Like Bang Dream just had a things like was it called Bang Dream the Film Live or something, which is the same concept. It's just the bands playing the songs on the screen.
Huh.
Yeah, but I'm 95% sure that's what the Utapri movie was.
Okay. Yeah, I did not see it.
No.
Despite the fact that I had two opportunities to. Actually, on that note, we were talking a little about the lives.
Yes.
So what's I know we got a few of those throughout the year, both Love Live and Bang Dream.
Yes, we got two this year. We got in January we had the Bang Dream Live, which was there. So Bang Dream has 3 bands that perform songs. Has Poppin' Party, who's the main band, Roselia, who is the secondary band, which is pretty much more popular than Poppin' Party at this point. And then we have a third band called Raise a Swelin, who initially started off as just covering the songs of the other bands in the franchise that didn't have members that all played their own instruments, and have since become their own separate unit. And they're currently the focus of the seasons 2 and 3 of the Bang Dream show. And so this one was the Popping Party and Roselia each had a performance a week apart. And that was in January. So I saw that, and I really enjoy watching the Bang Dream bands live. Seeing them actually have their own technical merits in performing on stage is really interesting and unique to see. And I would say that I wasn't really a big fan of Bang Dream beforehand. Mm-hmm. And after seeing the live performances and how the band members interacted with each other, interacted with the audience, I became more of a fan. And I ended up seeing them when they came to LA for Kara Expo. I went to that hell of a convention to see a performance. And I had a great time.
I've heard.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most disorganized conventions I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting some autographs. I ended up seeing the shows, and I ended up being able to get a seat for There was a Pop and Party acoustic live that I got a seat for, and I ended up getting one of the guitar picks, which was super cool. But that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the delayed viewing live that that happened in early January. So there was that, and then there was a Love Live Aqua concert that happened in, I want to say, May or June, I believe is when it came out. And that one I ended up not going to, because my friends went to it live and I was jealous, so I didn't see it. Uh, and then so after that, Azoland was the one who I know for sure handled the Bang Dream lives, and their website doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Their Twitter account, the last post on there is the post about the Love Live concert, and it's been completely silent since. So what has happened is there was a separate company, the group who actually subtitled the Bang Dream Lives took over and has started to put together delayed viewings for the Bang Dream Lives now. I believe they're called Haha, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a bad name for a company.
Yeah. Haha NADV.
Okay.
And so that was the group that was subtitling the live performances, which is another reason why I really liked the Bang Dream, because seeing, like, actually having subtitles for what they were saying was really unique as far as the delayed viewings were going.
Yeah, it sounded pretty essential for that one too.
It was.
Yeah.
And they have since worked with the US to get some live viewings there, and one of the last posts on their Twitter feed was a Canadian flag, which means I'm hoping that they're going to bring it to Canada soon.
Wait, so that one was in the U.S. only?
Yeah, so that was in the U.S. only.
Okay.
And that happened actually just a few weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
And their last post on their Twitter feed, as of a few days ago, was the Canadian flag. So it will be coming to Canada in some capacity. I actually ended up talking to one of the members of this group in Anaheim when I was there, and he was saying that they were working with Cineplex, and just like their contacts had gone radio silent for the holidays. So I assume it's probably going to be in Cineplex when it comes here, which is pretty exciting.
It's a good bet. On a related note, one notable film we did not get in Canada was Love Live Sunshine. Which a lot of people were upset about, but it looks, from what I have noticed about that particular film, it seems that the problems with the release stem far beyond simply not having it release in Canada.
Yeah. I've also heard that movie's not very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the movies that I bought the Japanese Blu-ray with English subtitles when I was in Japan this past time.
Yeah.
And I still haven't gotten around to watching it because I've just kind of been dreading it because I keep hearing that it's not very good. One day I'll get around to it.
I've heard there were a number of complaints going around that so first of all, the release of that film in the States was the day after the Blu-ray release in Japan, which strategically is awful because the whole thing that makes these theatrical releases work most of the time is that you get it out before the home video release happens in Japan so that people don't pirate it. The fact that the release happened exactly one day after the Blu-ray release in Japan, that seems to be a pretty strong sign that this was some weird contractual issue that was preventing them from preventing Funimation from releasing it any sooner than that. And the number of theaters that it was released in the States was incredibly random, sporadic, and limited. I think like San Francisco didn't even have a screening within 3 hours of that area, which is frankly outrageous. So I think that I can't even begin to speculate why this was, but I think the conditions in which it had to be released may have just prevented them from wanting to put any effort into it, which I guess just happens sometimes.
Yep.
But I suspect the reason that one didn't get a Canadian release was just due to whatever was limiting it from getting a proper release in the U.S. as well. I remember I was trying to ask Cineplex events about what was going on with that movie and if they were getting it, and every time they would get confused with the Love Live Sunshine Live, which we did get.
Yeah.
And I think it is ridiculous that we can get these untranslated live performance live delay or delay lives, live delays, for that are adjacent to the primary content in Canada, but not the actual anime, which seemed to be kind of ridiculous. But the Love Live Sunshine thing seemed to be a weird, isolated situation. So I'm not gonna lose any sleep over that. I know a friend of the show, Rin Senpai, did also get his hands on the Blu-ray, and I think he was trying to look into arranging like a screening somewhere at like a small venue somewhere in Vancouver. I don't think he was able to get that going though, unfortunately. Yep.
It's what it is. Which is just unfortunate overall, just because of, especially considering how the previous movie was also shafted in Canada, more or less.
Yeah.
It's disappointing to see that did continue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did eventually get the original film.
Yeah, we did.
The first film here.
Far after the Blu-ray release.
After, yep.
Yeah.
But it worked out in the end.
Yeah.
So one movie I did want to touch on briefly that I did see that I don't think a lot of people have had a chance to see yet was Children of the Sea, which is a Studio 4 Degrees Celsius movie. They played it at VIFF. So Children of the Sea it was directed by Ayumu Watanabe. He's done a whole bunch of Doraemon movies, and he's also the director of Space Brothers. But this is like his first kind of standalone movie that he's worked on. So have you heard much about Children of the Sea?
I've read the first 2 volumes of the manga, and I've been impressed with what I read. And the trailers for that movie look really good.
Yeah, so this movie I found was a real mixed bag. It's very ambitious. The whole ending sequence is like this kind of surreal roller coaster ride that I can't imagine having been as visually interesting or well realized in manga as it was as a film. The film had interesting ideas of relating origin of life in the sea to greater metaphysical concepts and stuff, and it all plays out in an interesting way in the finale, if kind of hard to follow. The problem is that a lot of the other aspects of the film outside of that kind of fall flat, and at least to me, they didn't really grab me. I've seen some people raving about this movie and some people just saying they didn't like it at all. And I'm somewhere in the middle for sure. I think some things work, some things didn't, but nothing really gelled for me in the end. I wasn't a big fan of the visual style. It seemed a little drab. I kind of feel like if you have read the manga, I haven't read the manga for this one, but I think the film might be an interesting companion for the novel because for the manga, because I have a feeling that the character arcs are probably more compelling in like a comic or serialized format than they were in the film. I walked away from the movie feeling a little, maybe not apathetic, but a little underwhelmed, honestly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's being boasted as like a real visual spectacle, which in some ways it is, but parts of the movie don't really come together like I think they probably should have. I'd say it's worth seeing though, but yeah, G-Kids released this. They played it as part of Vancouver International Film Festival. I think they intended to give this film a Fathom release or something, or Fathom Cineplex Events release throughout in 2019, but it didn't happen. I can kind of see why, because this is definitely more of an art film in a lot of ways. Kind of caught somewhere between being an art film and being a manga adaptation, which is why maybe it felt kind of lost in some ways. I guess I'm being overly negative. It's not a bad movie. It's worth seeing, but again, bit of a mixed bag. But I do wonder if we're going to see a wider release for that one at some point.
I would think so.
Yeah.
If it got the right buzz and the right trailers behind it, I think it could be. You could make a case for it.
I guess we should talk about Promare too.
Yeah. That probably comes after the next 2 I saw.
Okay. What was
so Tokyo Ghoul S is
is
the first one I saw. I'm not going to say too much about it. It's basically just carries over the same uh, tone as the first Tokyo Ghoul live action movie, with the exception of they did recast the actress who played Toka because the original is a member of Happy Science. And I think the new one does just fine. The cast is really good, and what I found most interesting about this one is it kind of just turns into a tokusatsu show at the end with like these like super effect heavy battles, uh, and it really kind of veers away from the horror parts,
Yeah.
which I really didn't mind. I am a big tokusatsu fan, and
So it just kind of unironically goes in
it
this
unironically
direction.
goes, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought especially like the last part was really fun. I
Yeah,
think
I haven't engaged with a lot of Tokyo Ghoul, but I could see it playing out in this way
yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
I had a pretty good time with it overall,
yeah,
which was fun over. And then the second thing that I saw that I believe came up before premiere was Rascal does not dream of a dreaming girl.
yes, yes. Another one that seemed to be to get a lot of buzz and was pretty successful from what I gather.
Yeah, it was. I
Yeah,
ended up
yeah.
watching the series. Rascal does not dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, which is a mouthful to say. Uh, uh,
It sounds like a horrible parody
it
of
does.
of something you'd find on Crunchyroll.
But I ended up
Yeah.
finding the series to be quite compelling.
Hmm.
It's the best way I can put it is it's a less stylistic, less creepy version of the Monogatari series. Basically centered around a guy finding a girl who has some kind of power and or some kind of supernatural occurrence that happens around her, and they become a couple right away, and then from there they find other girls who are also having these problems or other kids who are also having these problems and try to find ways to solve their inner adolescent trauma that is causing this.
Hmm.
And at the end of that series, there was there was one of the there was a cast of a few girls, and one girl didn't have her story told yet, and there were some implications. And this movie adapts the novel where her story is told.
Hmm.
And this movie really puts a bow on the entire series. Like I know it continues afterwards, but just finishing off the stories of all of the girls in his life. This one continues that in a way that has a really few really surprising scenes, uh, and some really surprising events that I had no idea where the story was going to go after. And I was at the edge of my seat for a lot of it, which I wasn't anticipating when I first decided to go on the journey of watching the series and then watching the movie.
Yes.
Uh, it's a toned down version, but it's really still compelling and really well told and well directed, without being overly stylistic. And I had a surprising amount of fun with this one.
And who released the movie here?
I believe
Oh, it was
it was
right.
Aniplex, yes.
Aniplex working with Funimation,
Hmm.
because they're both owned by Sony now, I
Yep,
guess.
that's how it goes now.
Yeah. So again, that's an Aniplex movie we did get. So now that they can, I do wonder if this means we're going to see Aniplex using Funimation Films as their outlet, because they don't work with Fathom in the States. Funimation Films actually just, I think, works directly with the theaters, from what I understand.
Hmm.
Or I think it's a case by case basis
Yeah.
kind of thing. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they're working together for future Aniplex releases, which I guess would be maybe the next Fate movie, or there's going to be a Fate Grand Order movie now, isn't there?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
Heaven's Feel is the one that's coming out next. And then there's I believe it is a two-part movie based on the Camelot story of Fate Grand Order, which I'm looking pretty forward to.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just to go off that point, I find that the Fate Grand Order, uh, I like it a lot. It ends up taking lots of the Fate ideas, and instead of keeping with lots of the mature ideas. It really has gone a bit more mainstream, and I think the currently airing Babylonia anime and the Camelot are both easy enough to follow without knowing anything else, and they're basically just shonen adventure stories, which is kind of what Fate Grand Order has turned into, at least the more popular parts, which is kind of a shame. Lots of the edge of Fate has gone. It's really been sanded down. Which is what happens when you become the most popular app almost ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have the more populous stuff that's... Well, I mean, I guess it's all pretty populous stuff.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you have the more mainstream-friendly stuff that's kind of on one stream. But then on the other hand, you still have Heaven's Feel. And, I mean, maybe we'll see more of the Lord Elmoy II waiver stuff carrying on the Fate Zero story, too. I'm hoping there's a second season of that, because that seemed to be pretty popular.
There's a lot of novels, so I think there will probably be more.
So there's a lot going on with Fate. I think it's safe to say there's something for everyone who likes that franchise. So it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Just there was one more release that I didn't see that I think is important to bring up, and that would be One Piece.
I was actually going to do that one next.
Okay, never mind.
We can talk about One Piece.
Okay.
So actually, also before we get to premiere, let's One Piece Stampede. Did you catch that one?
I did not. I saw ads for it all over Japan, and I just never managed to get to it in Japan. And then when it came out here, life got in the way. I believe it was probably a work-heavy time, and it was just not in the cards.
Yeah, I am 30 volumes behind in One Piece right now. So my understanding is that this One Piece Stampede is apparently very good, and it's been touted as kind of like a celebration of the franchise over the decades, with like little cameos from characters who have appeared all throughout the series, and apparently utilized in pretty satisfying ways. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I can't say. I do kind of wish I had made it out to see the movie, even though I'm really behind in the series. It sounded like the kind of thing that even if you have only a cursory familiarity with One Piece, you would have enjoyed it, which is great, because as with Dragon Ball, it seems like these more recent One Piece movies have been pretty good.
Yeah,
and I think it continued that trend.
Yeah, I'm honestly not the biggest fan of the One Piece movies that Oda's been a part of.
Yeah.
Lots of the One Piece movies I like are the ones that are a little more snappy.
Yeah.
Or the Hosoda directed one, which I think is still my favorite. And the fact that there's no release of it here is bonkers to me. I had to believe it.
We don't have... I don't think the first 7 movies just seem to be off limits for some reason.
Yeah.
Funimation doesn't license them, which I don't know if it's because they can't get them, or because at the end of the day, One Piece just isn't as big here as it should be. It's still one of the biggest franchises, but it's not enough for them to justify whatever that expense is for something old and standalone that they missed out on initially.
Yeah,
who knows?
I'd be surprised, because like the few of those One Piece movies are really solid affairs. Like the Hosoda one is really good, and movie 2 is the one that really made me like One Piece in the first place. And that one's only like a 40-minute movie, but it's a really fun distillation of what One Piece is. And it's a shame that there hasn't been some way to bring those movies over here, because those are the One Piece discs that I'd like to own over 1,000 episodes of the anime, which I'm never going to buy each individually. But I would like to get the movies and have them in my collection, because they're really strong pieces of animation. They're really fun to watch. Yeah,
there were just so many missteps with One Piece when it started here. I think they're just never going to make up for that. Assuming that it does actually end in the next 5 years, like they're saying it should. I think like Viz or Funimation, whoever, they just need to get right on it whenever Oda starts his next work, which he almost certainly will.
Yeah, and the fact that like Stampede came out here, and it was really popular when it came out here. Like I know a lot of people talking about it. Like I can see One Piece going forward is going to stay popular. It's just
I'm glad it's at least doing well enough to sustain these kind of releases in both the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah.
So that's good. So yeah, let's talk about Premiere, but I mean, what is there left to talk about? This has been, I think this movie has dominated a significant amount of anime discourse.
Yeah, like
through 2019.
At this point, who hasn't seen it?
Yeah,
is kind of what I've thought about it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a story about going to see it because they, you know how I mentioned Vancouver anime screenings just go to this one dingy little theater at the top of a fairly empty mall in International Village. That was also the case with Promare, which was a screening they announced like 1 week before it happened, and but when I was the day I was going to see it, I had actually been on Vancouver Island. I was going to visit Carl and Corey. Or Corey had visited. We went to go visit Carl, and I had to drop Corey off at the airport, and it gave me just under an hour and a half to drive from the airport to downtown Vancouver to see this movie. And now keep in mind, I never drive to downtown Vancouver because it's a terrible idea. I usually transit, but here I had no choice because this is the only screening I was going to have an opportunity to see. So I got down there and I made it with just enough time to spare to park, or what would have been just enough time to spare and park and watch the movie. But unfortunately, at the time, right at this time, a shooting had happened outside of International Village. And I need to emphasize, like, shootings almost never happen in Vancouver, but it happened right here at this time outside the theater, and it resulted in the one street I had to take in order to get into the underground parking at the mall being blocked off. So I could not park where I was supposed to park to see the movie, so I had to drive around to find some other parking, and I was running out of time, so I went to this parkade that was across the street from the theater because I didn't have time to find anything better, and I had to pay $25 to park to see this movie, which I got in there and I got there in time to see the whole thing, and it was magnificent. None of this detracted from my experience of watching the movie at all, which is a great testament to the quality of the film because I was in a pretty foul mood when I got there.
Yeah.
It was Promare is an absolute delight for everyone in almost every way that an anime film can be. I think
Absolutely. I personally got really overwhelmed at the start. Especially because I saw the subtitled. So you have both looking at the subtitles, and there is so much action happening on the screen really quickly. I found it really hard to get myself into the rhythm, but after that initial scene and the action kind of slows down, I ended up having a really big blast with it. I need to watch it again, knowing that I've already have, like, with the knowledge of what's going to happen on the screen, know where to look.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to improve my enjoyment on further viewings. I really enjoyed it overall. Like, the animation is fantastic. The characters are great. The story is really snappy, and there's just nothing. I haven't seen really anything like it. Like, if I were to compare it to another theatrical experience, I think this would probably be like what watching Redline in the theater would have felt like. Just in terms of the animation that is happening everywhere and the experience of sitting and just having a blast watching what you're watching.
Yeah, and it's a perfect distillation of what had been successful in previous things that Imaishi directed as well. But he just, he knows what works, and I think he refines it a little more. Well, okay, I think I prefer Gurren Lagann a bit to Kill la Kill, but Kill la Kill is probably better paced though. So in a way, he's always continually refining everything as he goes on, and this definitely was a big crowd pleaser. It wound up being way bigger than I think anyone expected it to be. And yeah, we got did you? I guess you only made it to the one screening and not the Redux screening.
No, I was. That actually happened when I was in Anaheim for the Para Expo. Yeah, so I missed that.
Yes. Yeah, I know the Rio picked up after it finished at Cineplex, the Rio picked it up in Vancouver. They only scheduled one screening originally, and they wound up having like 4 or 5, and everyone sold out.
Wow.
And I'm I'm assuming that these were screenings where people were yelling and cheering a lot and yelling things at the screen, which was apparently a big problem at some of the premiere screenings, especially during the second run.
Yeah.
I know some people were sharing something on social media, like giving you instructions on how to cheer and shout out things while you're watching premiere in the theater, with no consideration at all for the fact that some other people in the theater may not have seen it yet.
Yeah, I have to wonder how much of that actually ended up happening and how much of that was internet brouhaha.
I'm sure it was much internet brouhaha.
Yeah.
But I heard some accounts of people being exceptionally enthusiastic while watching premiere.
Yeah, and I can see that.
Yeah.
It's a movie that really touches the hearts of a lot of teens who would be watching anime for the first time and would go back and see and get really excited.
It brings out the adolescent in everyone in the best way.
Yeah, like I remember,
if you're already an adolescent.
Like I remember being a teen and being really excited, overly excited for different anime that I'm watching, and I'm not surprised that this is now transformed into yelling things at the theater screen. I think, as far as Canada goes, I would think that we're not in the same noise level as what I've heard the States is like.
So I don't think you can with a country as big as the United States and also a country as big as Canada, I don't think you can generalize too much. But based on my own experiences, based on what I've heard when I've talked to other people about their theatrical experiences, both in Canada and the U.S., it seems that there is you are more likely to encounter a rowdy crowd at any given movie when you're seeing a movie in the United States versus in Canada.
Yeah.
There does seem to be an identifiable trend there from what I've seen. Not scientifically proven.
No, but like every time I've heard of theater experiences in the States, like it could just be this is where lots of the film crowds are the people I listen to and hear opinions for. But I always hear about people like cheering and shouting when like their favorite characters appear on the screen, and that's never something I've ever experienced in a theater.
Or just giving or just like giving snide commentary on dumb things that happen in movies.
But yeah, Premiere is an absolute delight, and it's great.
It's a movie that yells at you, so you feel compelled to yell back.
Yep.
I think there is validity to that, but there should be a designation between the screenings you go to where you just watch the movie quietly and enjoy it, and the ones where you yell at the movie.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah. And that's how it worked in Japan, and people just thought that they would do what happened in Japan here without really considering that it was a limited release and people would be seeing it for the first time.
And you have to understand, in Japan, that's a big exception because people don't make any noise.
Oh gosh, no.
In the theaters in Japan, even when you're watching a comedy.
Yeah.
But even there's a place for screaming things at the screen, even in the disciplined theatrical culture of Japan. Yep. So there you go. It's okay. It's all good, but just know time and place. Time and place at all times. Yeah. But Premiere is great. I can't wait to get that on Blu-ray and just watch it over and over again because it is a highly rewatchable movie. In fact, I kind of regret not seeing it in theaters again.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing to talk about is the movie. Well, it just came out now, but it also debuted at Toronto International Film Festival, so it was a film that came out in Canada in 2019, which was Weathering with You. Just caught it last night. I enjoyed it a lot. It definitely is not as good as Your Name, which is probably what the first thing almost anyone who sees it will say. I found it was highly entertaining. It follows it's a different movie from Your Name, but it still kind of follows a lot of the same beats, which is, that's definitely a knock against the film to some degree. But I think that if Makoto Shinkai keeps making movies that are just a series of diminishing returns from Your Name, I don't think that would necessarily be a bad thing, because I think it's better than the trajectory that he was on before, which was a little all over the place.
Yeah. I have a very special relationship with this movie because I ended up seeing this on my trip in Japan. So
nice.
For me, this counts as a 2019 movie.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And just to make things even better for myself, I actually saw this in IMAX in Japan,
Oh,
which
wow.
was absolutely incredible. Uh, I had seen movies in Japan before. My knowledge of Japanese is very, very, very basic, but I can get by and I can get basic ideas. And I was a little worried going into this, wondering what I would understand or not. And I ended up getting most of the plot points, just a few different specific things I missed. Like the main thing I missed was I missed what the relationship between Keisuke and Natsumi was, and that was never really cleared up until I watched the movie and like, oh, it's a completely different idea than what I thought it was.
Yeah.
But that's basically it. And the more I looked back on it, the more I understood every plot point. I think because I saw it in Japan, I had a really in-depth relationship with it, and I really connected to this movie a lot. I I really like.
If you've been to Tokyo,
Mhm.
you'll watch this movie and be like, "Yep, that sure is Tokyo."
Oh my gosh.
It's yeah.
Yeah, that's the main point that I think is the
Yeah.
strongest. Like, it just absolutely nails what Tokyo looks like, especially at
Yeah.
night and in the areas for adults.
The setting is perfectly
Hmm.
realized. Yeah, especially with like red light districts and
Yeah,
stuff. I'm just like, "Yep, that is exactly what that looks
yeah,
like and feels like being in for sure."
yeah.
On that note, I'm curious what you thought of all of the licensed branding, and I don't think all of it was product placement, but
No,
there was certainly like licensed branding in there.
there is, and that didn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Especially both times I was in Japan. The first time was just before Your Name released, and
Hmm.
the second time was right in the middle of this. And it's both of them were just absolutely everywhere. There was ads everywhere. Like they have collaborations with the JR stations, which is the primary mode of
Hmm.
transportation. So when you were on a train, you would see it everywhere you went. Uh, I Tokyo, the Yamanote line has one or two trains that are specifically branded, and the entire train is themed on the same idea. And I was on a Your Name train on my last.
Oh yeah.
Every store I went to in 2019, there was always a radio playing the main theme from Weathering with You. It was inescapable. So something that big, I can see would have those connections. And uh, Tokyo itself is very branded in general, so I understand how that throws people off. But to
Hmm.
me, that
Yeah.
just kind of feels like, oh, this was actually filmed. Like it's actually like filmed with a camera. You would see those brandings anyway,
Exactly. Yeah.
and that it to me it adds to the realism of Tokyo, which I
It does.
which
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
find really important. And when you consider what happens at the end of the movie and
we we
I'm not
yeah.
gonna I can't get into what happens.
Yeah, we will not spoil
Uh,
the end of that
but
movie
it's
for sure. Yeah,
really I find that having that branding is a deliberate choice. It's for sponsorship, but I think there's also a reason that it's there,
yeah,
instead of just making money.
yeah. I mean, with the way Makoto Shinkai conceptualizes the world around him in anime, I think that's kind of an extension of the way that he incorporates things into his films.
Hmm.
Rather, it's a logical progression of how he handles settings and things in his films.
Yeah,
So yeah, it makes sense. I did find it peculiar that there's one running gag in the movie where they're constantly feeding a cat what is clearly calorie mate,
yeah,
but it's never identified as calorie mate.
no.
Also, I will not spoil what happens with that cat in the movie, but that might be why they didn't want to have the brand attached to
Yeah,
it.
I really just had a blast with that movie, and like a big part of it is the fact that I saw it in Japan. I really enjoy the climax of that movie and how sound is incorporated to the big scene. There's a point when the music swells and hits its crescendo at a very impactful moment, and I didn't have a reaction the first time I saw it, but the second time I saw it, I ended up tearing up and kind of shaking when it was happening, which I wasn't
Yeah,
expecting to happen to me. I think that it's not as impactful, not as good as Your Name. but I think it's still a really good movie on its own merits.
On that note, since you saw it when you were in Japan, and what I guess would have been in the summer, were you there during like the massive heat wave
Oh, I sure
in Japan?
was.
So what was it like? So I found it interesting in this movie. It's like showing this version of the summer of 2019 Japan, or I guess given some of the connections in the movie, this is technically in like 2021.
Yeah.
I guess that's actually when the setting would be. Summer of 2021 in Japan, where the temperature is below normal and it's constantly raining and flooding. When in reality the weather was like hitting almost 50 degrees in some places in Japan, from what I understand. Like, how did that affect the way you felt while watching the movie and experiencing like its depiction of weather?
It was really interesting. Because like the theater was of course air conditioned, and like air conditioned so much that it kind of got chilly. So at the parts when the weather dropped a lot in the movie, I was like, oh, I kind of felt that myself, which was neat. And then going back outside, I'm like, oh no, it's really hot. Maybe we should be concerned. Yeah, no, it was. I went in 2016 and then 2019, and it was unbelievable how hot it was in 2019.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's the only time of the year I can go to Japan, unless like the year lines up exactly right to go in the winter time.
That is very unfortunate.
It is incredibly unfortunate.
Summer is the only time I would never go to Japan.
I would not recommend going this summer if you at all could avoid it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it felt like the film. I kind of felt like Shinkai maybe wanted to say something about climate change in this film, but couldn't. I don't know how. I don't think that climate change is politicized in Japan the same way it is here.
No, I don't think it is.
But no, but I mean, on that note, maybe that kind of explains the film's depiction of climate and weather as well, in a sense. So maybe I shouldn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah. Also on that note, how do you feel Weathering with You compares to Shinkai's earlier work?
I think it actually reminds me a lot more of his earlier work, especially because it's not a complete crowd pleaser at the end.
Yeah.
I think that like I had to sit on that ending for half a year before anyone else saw it, and I could talk about it with people. Which was hard.
I was not expecting that. People have been very disciplined in hiding spoilers.
Yeah. Oh, I was waiting, and just like there's 3 moments in the movie where I was just waiting to find out what the crowd reaction around was going to be. And each of those 3 moments did not disappoint. Like, of those 3 moments, when I was in the Japanese theater trying to be quiet, I definitely inhaled very loudly at the first of these 3 moments, because I was not expecting what I saw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm hoping I'm vague enough to have people who watch the movie know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And not vague enough for anyone else to not know.
I know which moments you're talking
about. So I found that really interesting.
Yeah. I guess one other movie I think I missed on the list was Human Lost.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really hear much about that one.
Yeah, the reviews of that were from people who were watching it were dismissive enough that I just lost interest immediately after seeing it, so I just didn't really care. Icon ended up showing the second part of the Haikara-san movies at our event.
Oh, really?
Which didn't, we got, and that ended up coming from 11 Arts, and that was, I think, probably one of the only places that you could have seen part 2 of those movies.
In all of North America, actually. Yeah. that had a very limited release. I'm jealous because I can't even, I guess I could buy the DVD off of Right Stuff to see the second part. I really don't want to. Because I just want to watch that movie once.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the options for watching that are extremely limited, even if you are going outside of legal means.
Oh yeah.
So
no, which makes it kind of a miracle that it came out in the first place.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah.
I hope I get a chance to see that at some point.
Yep.
But, maybe just to finish off, because I think we've gone quite long with this.
Sure have.
What are the movies that are lined up for 2020? We know Ride Your Wave is coming in February,
which I am thrilled
as I mentioned before.
I cannot wait.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of fun,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm glad that Cineplex is finally giving Masaki Yuasa films a
Yeah, and
chance.
the fact that it got
Um,
a trailer before Weathering with You, I think is really going to help
yeah,
numbers. The
I hope
trailer
so.
looks a lot like looks a lot like the tone of Lou, which I really enjoyed, Lou Over the Wall, which I had a blast with. So I'm really looking forward to watching this one.
There's also Birthday Wonderland, or it's being released as The Wonderland here as well, which I gotta say, that is terrible SEO, because it's very hard to find something on just The Wonderland, whereas Birthday Wonderland is very Google friendly,
Hmm.
so I don't know why 11 Arts made that choice. It looks like in the States, it's being released across mostly independent theaters, so I don't think this is a Fathom release. Um, and it's by Keiichi Hara, who's the director of Miss Hokusai.
Hmm.
I don't think buzz has been especially overly positive about the
No, that's what
movie,
I've
but
heard too.
I'm curious to see it still. I they 11 Art says it's coming to theaters in Canada, so I'm assuming it's either gonna get a small Cineplex release later or might show up in some independent theaters. So we'll see what happens with that. It seems to be a little bit of an odd duck in terms of how the release is being handled. Violet Evergarden, so far U.S. only for reasons we mentioned before. The next My Hero Academia movie, that has been confirmed for U.S. and Canada, unsurprisingly. Um, and there's still that Eureka 7 Anemone movie,
Mm.
which Funimation said they were going to release in theaters, but it never actually materialized. I'm starting to suspect that it won't.
No, I mean, I think part of it is just the buzz around those movies has not been positive whatsoever,
Yeah,
and I think that that's probably hindering
yeah.
them releasing it overall.
I'm curious to see the Anemone film. I haven't heard really much about it, which might not be a good sign. But I'm still curious to see it. I want to see what those folks are gonna do with Eureka 7 coming back to it
Hmm.
over a decade later. But yeah, that's just up in the air for now. And were there any other films that I kind of missed that have been lined up for 2020 so far?
Nothing that's been lined up as a for sure
Yeah,
release. I'm sure Fate Heaven's Feel. I'm betting it's going to come out this year, or at the very least, it'll come out in time for the next podcast that we do.
yeah.
Um, both Heaven's Feel and potentially even the Camelot movie. Um, and besides that, there's nothing super. Or the Made in Abyss movie, I think,
Oh
has
yeah,
a
yeah.
good chance of coming
So
over here.
yeah,
If
push.
Sentai works with
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah, folks, if you want to see that movie in Canada, start telling Sentai Filmworks you want to see it because I think that's going to be the one to push for at least for the first part of 2020.
Yeah.
Or if they don't, we can just show it at the Van City Anime event and benefit from that neglect.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. And on that note, yeah, keep an eye on my social media and Van City Theater or VIF social media for any announcements coming up on that anime event because I'm hoping we get that together and I think it's going to be pretty good if we do. So Randy, I guess we'll wrap it up
Yeah.
now. Where can folks find you on social media and other stuff that you're involved in right
Well,
now?
people can find me. I am always at Icon. Um, I run all the programming, so you can find me running around or hopefully doing a panel. I do panels when I can manage to have free time. And then besides that, you can follow me on Twitter, and I am on Twitter at Chandyran. So think of Randy Chan and just reverse the CH and the R.
And yeah, and thanks for tuning in to Zon in Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge or email zonandcanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultra Klystron. Find it on his album Packet Flood at ultraklystron.com. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, which is you can now find Zon in Canada on Spotify at long last, as well as everywhere else you can find podcasts. If you can't find it on a podcast device that you use, please let me know and I'll try and fix it. Thanks for listening. See you again.